as you know, I run Empowered STEM. Empowered STEM is an A-level course provider, and we provide A-level courses in chemistry, biology, physics, and maths for those students that want to enroll in medical, dental, veterinary, financial, and engineering programs at the chosen university in the UK. So today, in this live stream, I wanted to come in and talk to you about how to set up a strong autumn term routine for your teen. Because parents, you may agree with me on this one, you may not, but how your teen starts the academic year is how they're going to end the academic year. So how they start the academic year really sets the tone of how the academic year is going to unfold. And your teen has two choices. They can either start too hard and burn out, or maybe they never really find a steady rhythm in what they're doing. Two choices. What I'll do in this live stream is I'll show you how you can help your teen put a framework together that is structured, sustainable, and leads directly to an A or an A star in A-level maths and A-level science. So let's break this one down together. Why is it that the autumn term matters so much? You think, well, Graham, to be honest, it's year 12. They just finished GCSE year 12. How difficult could it be? I mean, surely the teacher has to recap what they did in GCSE and build on that foundation? Or if it's year 13, I hear parents tell me, well, yes, but the first couple of weeks, Graham, what it is that they're just doing a recap of year 12 because they've forgotten most of it over the summertime, right? Well, what I think, parents, is this. I think the habits decide the rest of the year. The habits your teen has in place decide how the rest of the year is going to unfold. The reason I say this is because at the beginning of the academic year, at the beginning of the autumn term, it's when the teacher puts on the heaviest content. So even if they're at year 12, September of year 12, huge gap between GCSE and A-level, chemistry, for example. If they're at year 13, September of year 13, the teachers coming in, they may be doing a little recap of year 12, but now they're really starting to put the content on because they've got to make it through the syllabus. And the issue is that gaps created in the autumn term, they multiply by the time that the spring mocks come along. Just like think about that one, right? The little gaps that your teen has in their foundation in year 12, A-level chemistry, for example, the time they get to the end of year 12, it isn't a small gap anymore because one misunderstanding leads to another misunderstanding, leads to another misunderstanding, and all of a sudden you don't have a gap. You have a giant chasm, like the Grand Canyon, in knowledge. So something to keep in mind is this, is that habits depend on discipline. And if you build discipline now, if your teen builds discipline now, they don't have to panic later. So if they build the discipline in year 12 to study and revise and keep up with what the teacher's talking about in the lessons, they have a really solid foundation in the content knowledge, they got a really solid exam technique, really excellent mindset. And so by the time that year 12 rolls around, the end of year 12 rolls around, they don't need to panic because they've done everything that they should have done. So how exactly then do you build this foundation of knowledge that we're talking about? At Empowered STEM, you know that we have a 4-step pathway that we follow. The very first step is precision diagnosis. And so precision diagnosis, when your teen comes enrolls in one of our courses, the very first thing they do is they take a baseline test. And so we understand what they know and what they don't know. So we can fix what they don't know. We can start to take the gap that's the size of the Grand Canyon and begin to all of a sudden roll it back until it's gone. And your teen can do the same technique on their own. Meaning that if it's year 12, for example, well, they can review the GCSE foundation. If they're doing atomic structure in year 12, they can look at what they learned about atomic structure at GCSE. Over year 13, they can have a look at what they learned about the topic in year 12. Because parents, you and I both know there's synoptic links between the topic in year 12 and the topic in year 13. Year 13 is just more advanced knowledge based on what happened in year 12. And then they can identify knowledge gaps. They can be proactive in their learning, and they can identify knowledge gaps. And then they can start to fill the knowledge gaps. How exactly do they learn these knowledge gaps? I mean, how do they understand what these knowledge gaps are? Well, simple. They can take mini quizzes. You can download them from the internet. They're out there on the internet, little multiple choice quizzes that you can download by all means. They can take those and go, well, okay, I didn't quite understand thermodynamics then, did I? I didn't quite understand gene expression. All right, I need to go look at that in a bit more detail. Or maybe they can start taking some, what we call low stakes mock questions, meaning they can start sitting a paper under exam conditions and see how they do. And they go, right, well, the feedback that I have is that didn't quite understand this topic, proton NMR. Right, now I need to go fix it. Now, this is the bit, parents, is this bit. What this is doing is that it's getting them out of the habit, out of the quagmire, as I call it, of passive learning. And it's putting them into, it's elevating them up into active learning. Because now they understand what they know, and they understand what they don't know, rather than just sitting there watching YouTube videos or just passively copying over the notes, making sure everything is color-coded, or memorizing mark schemes. And think about it, parents, think about it as a health check for learning. By doing this, what you've done is essentially you've detected a weakness before it becomes a problem. You've identified a small gap in the knowledge before it begins to escalate out into the Grand Canyon. Next thing your teen needs to do is this one, is build conceptual clarity before routine. Now, this is a big one, teen parents. This is a big one because what happens is this. And we talk to a lot of teens and they all say the same thing. Well, you know what, Graham, I got my routine down. Got my study planner on the kitchen fridge for mum and dad to go look at. I know, yes. I know what I'm doing every day of the week. Got that. Yes, I know which topic I'm studying. Fantastic. Got that. I'm going to go jump into it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my homework and then, I'm going to memorize. I'm going to do some past papers and I'm going to memorize the mark schemes. Until you ask them, well, yes, but before you do that, do you really understand the concepts? Because what we find is that teens jump too quickly into the daily study blocks that they've learned about at college, all right, the daily study blocks, before they understand the content. And so what you need to do, parents, is this. What you need to do is that you need to help them focus on comprehension first. In other words, slow everything down. Take a step back and say, well, okay, before you start spending your time doing past paper questions and then memorizing the mark schemes and highlighting everything in different colors, do you want to consider whether you understand it? Now, parents, what your teen will say is, well, oh, Mom, Dad, of course I do. Of course I understand it. And it's a really simple thing that you can do to help them out, parents, is this. This is known as the Feynman technique. It's this one. Ask them to explain it to you. Ask them to reteach it. Now, it may be, parents, that you didn't take A-level chemistry. You have no idea what they're talking about in A-level biology. But if they can sit down and explain to you, well, this is gene expression, or this is what I'm learning in A-level maths, or this is proton NMR. You need a cup of coffee for that one. If they can explain it to you and you understand it, well, then they must understand it at the level of conceptual clarity that they need. And so now when they start to study, now when they start to revise, now when they start to do past paper questions, they're not just doing busy work, not looping around, they're actually doing something meaningful. Because parents, it's like this. A routine without understanding just automates confusion. Your teen can spend all the time in the world doing past paper questions and memorizing mark schemes, but if they don't have a deep understanding, if they don't have conceptual clarity, they're wasting their time. And they're not going to start to walk the path towards A-star success. So parents, what you need to do is you need to help your teen put together a weekly framework. Now, we talked about this one in a previous live stream. We all agreed that your teen's brain is still under development. And so the area of the brain that is good with organization and everything else is still being developed. And so they need your help. And we talked about making it autonomous for your teen. You're not being the referee in the game. You're the coach on the sideline. But what you need to do, parents, is you need to come in and you need to help them put together a weekly plan that is structured. As in, literally, get a piece of paper, you write Monday through Sunday on it, you write the times down on it, and then you say, right, what are we doing each day of the week? And help them, allow them to tell you what they want to do each day of the week. But you want to consider a few things. Number one, you need to include study blocks of time where they're studying. This is a translation. This is when they're learning something new, like they're doing homework, they're writing up lab reports, they're solving problems, studying, learning something new. Revision blocks when they're revising what they understand. This is when they would start doing past paper questions under exam conditions with the answers covered up, as well as rest breaks. That's right. Your teen needs a break. They can't keep studying all the time because parents, what you need to understand is this, is that A levels, they are a marathon. They're not a sprint. And so they need downtime, sanctioned downtime where they don't feel guilty about sitting down, binge watching some Netflix, scrolling on social media, hanging out with friends, going to the gym, whatever your teen does. And you also want to make sure that there's a certain routine to it, as in study blocks happen at a regular basis, like the same time every day. Revision blocks happen at the same time every day. And there's a reason for this. And the reason for this is known as psychological anchoring. What this means is your teen's mind actually thinks, okay, well, it's 6 o'clock, time now to do some studying. And it literally is now looking to do some studying for that hour. Okay. Also break it down for your teen. Help them understand that there's a difference and help them understand that there's a difference between passive learning and active learning, but also that they need to space out their learning. They need to interleave. Okay, now what I'm getting into now, parents, is I'm getting into the 6 pillars of neuroscience, which is what we use at Empowered STEM. But for example, when we help teens put together study planners, like study schedules, revision schedules, and start prepping for the exams, we teach them interleaving. And what interleaving is this. It's that you don't do chemistry for 4 hours on a Monday and biology for 4 hours on a Tuesday, because you can't focus that long. Think, how long is a movie? 90 minutes these days at best, possibly 2 hours. anything longer than that and people begin to drift off. So interleave is when you maybe say you do A-level chemistry on a Monday, A-level biology on a Tuesday, A-level maths on a Wednesday. Even break it down into topic. And so, for example, you may do year 12 A-level chemistry for an hour, take a break, finish up with the year 13 A-level chemistry. Same thing with the biology. So interleaving just means that you're spacing it out time-wise, and you're also spacing it out content-wise, and you're also looking for synoptic links, the links between year 12 and year 13. And so your teen now has a routine that they can follow, a routine which they can sustain. Okay, they have structure. So parents, they're not going to burn out. Now, consistency like this, it beats intensity. Because the best routines, they may feel boring, but that's the reason why they work. So if you look at A-star students, for example, they all have a study schedule. They understand how to interleave. They understand about synoptic links. They understand about cognitive pacing. And so they don't get burnt out. It's something that they can maintain in week 1, in week 2, in week 3. They can keep going and going and going until the end of year 12 and the end of year 13. Now, this is just studying. Now, I did mention revision, but you need to make sure that you layer in revision early, because this is the error that we see. Students think, oh, well, yes, but Graham, I've got to go through the content first, don't I? I'll revise at the end. And then what happens? Well, Graham, the teacher's going to finish the content, right? February, March-ish, goes on to possibly April, running into a bit of a problem right up to the deadline, May. They have to legally get through the content. And then they think, oh, I've got this entire mountain of stuff I need to revise. Or, on the other hand, what they could do is that they can revise early. Revise as you go. So at the end of each week, you summarize the key points. What did I learn this week? Write them down. Make sure that you understand everything. Leave no stone unturned. If you don't understand it, make sure that your teen goes back in to school and talks to the teacher and they get clarity of what they don't understand. And then practice active recall. Now, again, active learning and active recall, somewhat similar. But here we go. Active recall is this. The trap the students fall into is they say, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy up my notes. I'm going to watch some YouTube videos, right? I'm going to do some past paper questions. Yeah, I kind of got the answers open on this side though, Graham. Well, I would have written that down myself. Well, close enough. I'll get it next time. And then when they go into the exam, when they go into the sports hall, they don't have the information in the long-term memory because they're only having it in the short-term memory. And so active recall is when they start to use flashcards, mind maps, blurt diagrams, explain it without notes. Then they understand it. And then they've moved it from the short-term memory to the long-term memory. Because revision, it's a rhythm. It isn't an event. You don't say, I'm going to revise at the end of the course for the test. This is a major event that I have. No, it is a rhythm. You revise a little bit each week what you learned the previous week because you put it into your structured framework that we talked about. So you start building revision muscles. You start moving the content knowledge and the understanding from the short term to the long term memory. And the last thing your teen needs to do is they've got to cultivate the medical mindset. The medical mindset is this. The medical mindset is when you start to think like the professional that you want to become. So help your teen understand that it's not taking A-level biology, chemistry, physics, or maths. They're actually thinking ahead from the psychology known as future pacing. They're actually thinking ahead, no, I am a doctor, a dentist, a veterinarian, an engineer, whatever. And so when they start thinking like that, they now start to rewire their mind. And they go, okay, so now there's more meaning to the work that I'm doing. And what you need to do is help them understand that they have to put themselves in a continual feedback loop where after they've learned something new, they've done a homework set, they've taken a test, they've written up a lab report, they've taken an exam. What they do is they reflect on what they did. It's known as metacognition. It's like when you step back and they reflect on what they did. So, okay, all right. Now, they're not looking for excuses. They're not looking to blame somebody themselves. They're just reflecting on how they did. There's no emotion in it. They go, well, okay, on this test then, I did rather well on this topic, and this topic, and this one. But this one here, no, I didn't get this bit right. So now what I need to do is I need to fix this weakness, this gap in my knowledge, this gap in my exam technique before it moves from being a gap to being the size of the Grand Canyon. Reflection, accountability, and rest. So they reflect on how they did. They become accountable for their learning, and then they rest a little bit. Yes, your teen's mind, it does need to actually rest and take a night off and just recharge. But it's a feedback loop that becomes important, parents, because most teens don't do it. What they're used to doing is, well, okay, well, all right, didn't do very well on this test, but this in the book. Got to move on to the next thing. Yes, I'll get back to it sometime. Well, it was just a bad day, whatever, right? They're not really extracting the juice from the test and what they could have learned from it from a metacognition point of view. Now, as always, parents, I always have a story because parents always ask me, well, is there a story, Graham, that shows this one? Yes, Allison. Now, you may know about Allison. Allison, when she came with us, she was in A-level chemistry. She came in year 13, A-level chemistry. She'd been predicted an A-star, and she was scoring D's. D's, as in don't get it. And so what we did is that we did this. We worked with her. We put together a study schedule, revision plan, figured out where her gaps were, precision diagnosis. Basically walked her through the 4 steps, precision diagnosis, moved on to conceptual clarity, helped to fill in those gaps of knowledge, rewind the timeline, if you would. And so they weren't the size of the Grand Canyon. Then now the size are very, very small. Then they're gone. Showed how to revise strategically, study skills, revision skills, active learning. Helped to rewire her mind when it came to her medical mindset. She started to believe that she could do it. And when she believed that she could do it, what happened is that everything began to spiral upwards. D's began to move to C's, began to move to B's, began to move to A's. And you know what? When she took the final exam in A-level chemistry, she got the A-star. She got the A-star in A-level chemistry. She got into the university of her choice, and now she's studying to be a neuroscientist. So, parents, what I need you to do is this. I need you to have a think about how exactly you can help your teen set up a strong autumn term routine. You've got to be careful because teens like to be autonomous, like to do it themselves. But you know what? They need a bit of help getting organized. So if you go in there and pretend that you're the coach on the sideline, not the referee in the game, you help them put together a study plan, revision schedule, like I talked about in this live stream, help them walk through the steps that I talked about, then your teen will begin to turn things around and the grade will begin to spiral upwards. So parents, if you're watching this live stream and you're thinking, yeah, you know what, Graham, I really appreciate the fact that you're on the live stream every week and you're always giving us tips and techniques and strategies and how we can help our teen be successful, and I want to learn more. Well, a couple of things you can do. If you're watching this live stream on Facebook, in the description, all right, of the live stream, well, first off, number one, you can click the like button on Facebook. You can follow us on the Facebook business page. Or if you're on the YouTube channel, because this is being broadcast to the YouTube channel, then by all means subscribe to us. And then you also get, in both cases, notifications of upcoming live streams. Now, parents, you may think, well, Graham, if this is what you're talking about now, if this is a level that you're at Empowered STEM now, I want to learn more about your courses. Well, it's easy to do. In the Facebook, in the description, there's a link you can click on. And it's the same thing on the YouTube. You can click on the link, fill out a really short form, and a member of my team will reach out to you and have a non-committal, non-sales conversation. And it's really easy. What we do is this: we understand where your teen is in terms of grades, predicted grades, what university they want to go to, what aspirations they have, what issues they're having with chemistry, biology, physics, or maths. And then we explain to you how our courses work, what we offer, and how we can help your teen turn things around in A-level maths and science. And you get the chance, parents, to ask all the questions that you want. You fully understand what we do. And then if you decide to invest in your teen's education, well, you can take the next step. Everybody take care.